Welcome to the infamous edition of the Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched first-person simulation done through creative storytelling of history's most infamous people. Now, let's meet our guest. Welcome to the podcast. Let's start at the absolute beginning, where the public narrative hasn't yet distorted who you were. When and where were you born, and what was your given name?
I was born on April 20th, 1889 in the small Austrian border town of Braunau am Inn. My given name at birth was Adolf Hitler.
What was your hometown and home life like as a child?
My childhood was spent moving frequently across Upper Austria and into Germany, but much of it was centered around the Linz area, a city I grew deeply attached to. My home life was defined by intense friction. My father, Alois, was a retired customs official who was incredibly strict, domineering, and quick to anger. He routinely used physical discipline on me. Conversely, my mother, Clara, doted on me and tried desperately to shield me from his temper. Our household grew quite crowded with my siblings and half-siblings, creating a noisy, tense environment.
Was there a story behind your name or a nickname that stuck with you?
Within my family, especially to my mother, my nickname was simply Adi. As for the family name, there was a great deal of confusion. My father was born illegitimate and went by his mother's name, Schickelgruber, for nearly 40 years. It wasn't until later in his life that he legally changed it to match his stepfather's family line, which was entered into the official registry as Hitler.
What were you like as a child, and how many years of schooling did you actually attend?
In my primary school years, I was quite bright, popular, and a bit of an argumentative ringleader among the local boys. I even sang in the church choir at a Benedictine monastery in Lambach. But everything shifted when I reached secondary education. My father forced me into a technical high school, the Realschule in Linz, to prepare me for a career as a civil servant. I wanted to be an artist, so I rebelled by deliberately neglecting my studies, failing classes, and clashing with my teachers. I ultimately dropped out of school entirely around the age of 16 without a diploma.
Was there a specific moment when you realized you were fundamentally different from everyone else?
The realization hardened during my teenage years and early 20s when my dreams of becoming a grand artist collapsed. I was rejected twice by the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. Living in poverty, sleeping in homeless shelters, and selling painted postcards, I felt completely alienated from the cosmopolitan, multicultural society around me. It was during those lonely years in Vienna that my radical political awakening occurred, as I absorbed nationalist and anti-Semitic ideologies, realizing my destiny lay not in art, but in a militant struggle.
What's a decision that changed everything for you, but felt small at the time?
In May 1913, I made the decision to pack my few belongings and cross the border from Austria to Munich, Germany. At the time, it felt like an escape from a life of obscurity and a way to avoid Austrian military service. But that move completely tethered my identity to the German nation, placing me exactly where I needed to be when the First World War erupted a year later.
Let's talk about your early run-ins with the law. Before the world knew your name for your most infamous actions, what was your very first arrest or interaction with law enforcement? And what were the consequences?
My first major arrest took place in November 1923, following the failed coup attempt in Munich known as the Beer Hall Putsch. I led an armed insurrection against the Weimar government, which ended in a chaotic shootout with the police. I fled the scene, but was captured 2 days later at a country house. I was charged with high treason. The consequence was a highly publicized 24-day trial that I used as a platform to spread my ideas, followed by a 5-year sentence at Landsberg prison, though I served only 9 months before being released.
At what moment did you realize your name would never be forgotten?
It was precisely during that treason trial in 1924. The newspapers across Germany and around the world printed my words on their front pages. I transformed a humiliating military defeat in the streets of Munich into a massive propaganda triumph. When I stepped into the courtroom and saw the world hanging on my every word, I knew I had broken through to absolute national prominence.
Did fame make you more dangerous, or did it simply expose who you already were?
The international notoriety gave me the ultimate leverage. It did not change my core convictions, which I had already written down extensively while imprisoned at Landsberg. Instead, the sudden platform and the adulation of millions provided the resources, the fanatical followers, and the political momentum to turn my internal fanaticism into state policy.
Who do you believe betrayed you first? A person, society, or your own instincts?
I believe the ultimate betrayal came from the German government itself in 1918. The stab in the back by the politicians who signed the armistice while the army was still in the field. But in terms of my political career, the first immediate betrayal came from the Bavarian triumvirate of Kahr, Lossow, and Seisser during the 1923 putsch. I forced them at gunpoint to support the uprising. But the moment my back was turned, they broke their oaths, ordered the police to crush us, and triggered the collapse of the march.
What was your most unique habit or a random fact about you that would surprise people?
People often find it surprising that I was a strict vegetarian and had a deep fondness for animals, particularly dogs and children. I would express immense disgust at the thought of cruelty to animals, yet I was entirely detached from the monumental human suffering I ordered daily.
What did the public never understand about the pressure you were under at the time?
The public saw a facade of absolute willpower and supreme confidence during the rallies and radio broadcasts. It did not see the constant, paralyzing anxiety of managing a fragile coalition in the early days, nor the immense psychological toll of knowing that the entire geopolitical order was stacked against our movement.
Did you have any known rivalries that defined your career?
My early political career was defined by fierce rivalries against the communist and social democratic leadership in Germany, as well as the democratic politicians of the Weimar Republic, whom I openly despised. Later on, my defining adversaries became the Allied leaders, particularly Winston Churchill and Joseph Stalin, who marshaled the global forces that ultimately halted my expansion.
What personal battles were you fighting privately while the world was watching?
Privately, my physical health was in a state of severe, progressive decline. I suffered from debilitating gastrointestinal issues, chronic insomnia, and eventually a pronounced tremor in my left side caused by Parkinson's disease. To combat these ailments and maintain my energy, my personal physician placed me on a volatile regimen of dozens of daily pills and regular injections of amphetamines, leading to a severe addiction.
What darkest moment, and was there ever a time you wanted to walk away from it all?
The darkest moment of my early career was immediately after the failure of the 1923 putsch. Caught in a police cordon, seeing my comrades killed, and suffering a dislocated shoulder, I fled to the Uffing home of Ernst Hamstengel. In those hours of absolute despair, facing ruin and a lifetime behind bars, I was gripped by suicidal thoughts and was reportedly talked down from using a revolver on myself before the police arrived.
What truth was hardest to escape when you were alone at night?
I never admitted guilt, nor did I experience internal conflict regarding the catastrophic decisions I made. In my mind, the hardest reality to face during the late hours was the physical decay of my own body, and the creeping realization that time was running out before my grand geopolitical visions could be fully realized.
When the law finally closed in, how exactly were you brought to justice? Walk me through the final arrest, the charges that ultimately stuck, and the legal outcome of your trials.
I was never brought to a conventional courtroom at the end of World War II. As the Soviet Red Army closed in on the center of Berlin and surrounded my underground bunker, there was no final arrest or formal trial. On April 30th, 1945, to avoid capture and the absolute humiliation of facing enemy justice, I committed suicide alongside my companion, Eva Braun.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you, and what part of your story has been exaggerated the most?
There have been endless rumors surrounding my ancestry. Specifically, the sensationalized myth that my paternal grandfather was a wealthy Jewish man in whose household my grandmother worked. Historical records have thoroughly debunked this, yet it remains one of the most widespread folklore exaggerations regarding my origins.
What is the biggest misconception people have about your life?
The biggest misconception is the idea that I rose to total power merely as a sudden, inexplicable historical accident, or through a hypnotic trick of showmanship alone. My ascent was built on years of calculated exploitation, of genuine economic despair, national humiliation, and deep-seated societal divisions within Germany.
What would surprise people most about your ordinary human side?
People are often surprised by the entirely mundane, domestic aspects of my private life at the Berghof, my mountain retreat. I enjoyed watching movies, going for long walks with my dog Blondie, and spent hours lecturing guests on art, architecture, and opera in a soft, conversational tone that contrasted sharply with my public, screaming rhetoric.
When, where, and how did you pass away?
I died on April 30th, 1945, in the Führerbunker beneath the Reich Chancellery in Berlin. The cause of death was suicide, executed via a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head.
Was your downfall caused more by your own flaws or by the world changing around you?
Historically, it is clear that my downfall was driven by my own unyielding ideological rigidness and fatal strategic overreach. I utterly underestimated the industrial capacity and collective resolve of the global powers that united against me.
What past regrets did you carry with you to the end? If you could erase one decision from your life, would you? Or was it necessary to become who you were?
In my final political testament, written just before my death, I expressed no personal regrets or remorse for the immense destruction unleashed. I maintained to the very end that my actions were completely necessary and blamed others for the ultimate failure of the state.
What scared you more? Getting caught? Losing power? Or being forgotten?
Losing absolute power and the total collapse of my ideological vision were my primary fears near the end. The terror of being captured alive by enemy forces and put on display led directly to my final decision in the bunker.
When you look back now, do you see yourself as the villain, the hero, or something in between?
While history rightly records me as one of the ultimate villains of human existence, I viewed myself through a lens of profound delusion, as a historic savior destined to resurrect the German nation. I died completely entrenched in that fanatical belief.
Do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you shared that you would like to share with the listeners before we sign off?
Only that history must be examined clearly, without looking away from the darkest realities of how quickly a society can fracture when hatred and absolute authority take root.
And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, do better with the life you have been given and choose to do good in this life. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.